conventional typically will not work. We won't get attention. You need to find what's unique and different about you and lead with that. And when you tap into that, that's when your creative side can really come alive.
Welcome to the Shine Strategy Podcast, where entrepreneurs, visionaries, and business owners are getting visible and changing the world. I'm your host, Heather Monahan, an award-winning publicist, entrepreneur, and business mentor. Today's show is sponsored by PR Stars. For more inspiration and Shine strategies, head over to shineinsiders.com now for my free masterclass so that you too can get visible and go from local to global. Hey, Shine Insiders! Are you tired of being the best kept secret in your industry? Well, I have a solution for you, and it's called free publicity, and we can actually get it for you fast. Go ahead on over to podcast.theshinestrategy.com. Over there, you're going to find my free pitch template, and that's going to help you get into major newspapers so that you can stop struggling to find your clients. Let them find you. We also have all of our show notes over there. You'll also see how to join my community and my upcoming free masterclass. So again, that's podcast.theshinestrategy.com. All right, everyone, let's dig in. Hello, Shine Insiders. I'm so happy to have you here today. We have an incredible guest, Heather Monahan. She is such a fascinating person. She is someone who started with very humble beginnings and has become one of the few women in the world to break the glass ceiling in corporate America. She's been named one of the most influential women in radio in 2017. Thrive Global named her a limit-breaking female founder in 2018. She hosts the Creating Confidence with Heather Monahan podcast on PodcastOne. She's also a best-selling author, professional speaker, and entrepreneur. She's been featured in USA Today, CNN, and on Steve Harvey. And she was recently a guest lecturer at Harvard. She's all about female empowerment and has even trademarked the hashtag #BossInHeels. So with all that being said, welcome, Heather. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks so much for having me.
You know, I was looking through your bio and your info. Now, it looks like, are you originally from Worcester, Massachusetts?
Yes, I am.
I am from Western Mass myself, so I guess that's more central. But I grew up in Northfield, which is only about an hour from there.
Oh, yeah, New England.
Yes, small towns, although Worcester is a little bit larger of a town. Tell us a little bit about how this all started, going back to your roots. Like, what brought you to where you are today? How did you start out, and what was the inspiration to become this successful at what you do?
So I was one of 4 kids. My mom was a single mother. She had divorced my biological father, and we moved into a trailer behind my grandparents' home right outside of Worcester. And my childhood was really dark. It was trying. My mother worked 3 jobs and struggled financially for a really long time. And it was one of those situations where I just thought, certain people were born beautiful and successful and confident. And then there was other people like me that just struggled. And, my childhood was really one where I was just, trying to get by. Well, one thing I learned during all of that was I need to make my own money. So by the time I think I was 9, I started a paper route. I started bussing tables at diners. I started working at fast food restaurants, waiting tables, and ultimately becoming a bartender, from the time I was 9 till, right until I went to college. And I really learned the skills necessary for sales and how to create revenue at a very young age. And I learned how to work really hard because I really wanted to get rid of that issue of, no money and struggling for money. So that propelled me early on. And I decided I'm chasing money. And that was the wrong idea, but it took me from college to the Gala Winery to get into sales. And I became the top salesperson at the Commonwealth distributor in New England for Gallo. And then I was sexually harassed, and I quit that company because I didn't want to try to take on the head of the company that was harassing me. So I went to an event and met an owner of a radio group, and I went to work for him the next day. And I worked for him for a year. I became a top salesperson. I just simply outworked everyone. And he offered me an equity position. And I moved to Saginaw, Michigan for him and took over a $25 million property. And we sold it for $55 million in under 3 years. And I went from there to a publicly traded company based in Naples, Florida. And I pitched them on a job that didn't exist, VP of sales. And I was awarded that position. And I stayed with them for 14 years consecutively, advanced a multitude of times, won a lot of awards. And during my time leading the revenue and the sales team at the company, I more than doubled the company's revenue from 100 million to over 200 million. And I was named the chief revenue officer of the organization. And then when the CEO I had reported to for years became ill, he elevated his daughter and she immediately fired me. And it was really one of those low moments in life that I couldn't have ever anticipated. And I decided, through some very difficult moments to go out on my own. And the first thing I did was I wrote and self-published my first book, and that came out last year. And then I started the speaking circuit to promote my book, and I got picked up by a number of different speaking bureaus, GDA speakers, Harry Walker Speaker Agency, Big Speak, and really started leaning into the speaking business. And then I created my online course, and then I partnered with PodcastOne and launched my podcast. And really, this has all happened. It was 2 years ago that I was fired. Over the past 2 years. And it's just it's a bizarre string of events that have led me to really living in my passion and my purpose and led me away from corporate America.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And I can so relate because I had left Western Mass, like same part of the world, and really wanted to come out to LA and Hollywood and work in film publicity. And I had a pretty rough experience in Hollywood, and I liken it to getting kicked off a speeding train that was going in the wrong direction because I was killing myself. I was, digging an early grave, working ridiculous amounts of hours and in an unhealthy, toxic corporate culture. And then that's when I started out on my own. And I just have found that sometimes those terrible things that happen, they're the biggest blessing. So do you feel like in some ways that it was a good thing for you that you ended up having that experience with being fired from that job?
Yes, 2 years later, I can say that. However, I want to be really clear with everyone. I didn't know that for a very long time. I definitely was suffering. I was struggling. I was in panic mode for a while. And I also teetered back and forth with the idea, should I go back to corporate America or should I keep trying to do this? Am I going to be able to make it or should I go back to what I know? So those times that, first year was extremely hard.
Wow. So now it seems that your whole focus is on empowering mostly women and talking a lot about confidence. I mean, that's the name of your podcast and your book. Can you speak a little bit to why the focus is so much on confidence?
Sure. So I learned my whole career was about sales and sales leadership. And I never really thought about the role confidence played in that. And it wasn't until I was fired. I was working in a toxic environment as well as you were. And I was in a situation with a woman who was in the C-suite with me, who hated me. She saw me as a threat and she was constantly trying to undermine me. And this was for a couple of years leading up to when I got fired. And what I hadn't realized at the time was I was trying to make myself smaller. I was trying to deflect her negativity. I thought maybe if I'm not taking the bigger stage or if I'm not putting myself out there and speaking up, she'll start to get more comfortable. What I was actually doing was I was chipping away at my confidence during those last couple of years, and I was allowing her to grow in strength. And I had no idea I was doing it because I was just trying to survive the negative situation. I wasn't aware. And when I got fired, I had time, that first month when I was at home and not knowing what I was going to do, to really think about that and piece those different images and moments together to see I was an expert in sales. I was a phenomenal leader. I had fantastic track results. I had all the skills and expertise anyone would need. However, inside, I wasn't feeling good about myself because I was stifling my voice. I was holding myself back and I wasn't living to my potential. And that was never letting me realize what I could actually achieve and become and do. And confidence was really the center of that missing link that, I seemed to have everything together, but I was missing that one thing. Even though other people might not have been aware of it, I became acutely aware of it when I was sitting on my couch after I was fired. And that's when I decided I'm just going to write a book and share with everyone what I've learned so that other people don't have to make those same mistakes.
Oh my gosh. I love that you're talking about that, because obviously this being the Shine strategy, my background being in PR, publicity, and, being all about helping people step into the forefront and the spotlight, in front of their business. And it is about shining. And to do that, you have to be confident. So it's wonderful that you went through that experience, as much as it probably was terrible at the time. And we talk a lot about that, like that famous Marianne Williamson quote. I think that just came up again in one of my recent episodes about how playing small doesn't serve you or the world. So I love that this is like one of your main themes in working with people to help them. Can you speak a little bit more to your programs and how that works? How do you help people become confident?
Sure. So my book really lays out all of the steps that I took to create confidence, authentic, true confidence in my life. And I also lay out examples of times in my life when I wasn't confident and how that looks and is different. And for some people, everyone has different struggles. Everyone has a different past and baggage they carry through their life. But some of the themes that are pretty consistent are you need to fire the villains in your life. If you have a negative person in your life speaking down to you, belittling you, and trying to hold you back, that will inevitably chip away at your confidence. So that's one of the first steps that I ask people to do is, create a list of who are those villains in your life that you need to fire, because when you fire them, you will literally take off. Now, you may be running a negative tape in your head and saying a lot of negativity to yourself. And in that case, you need to rewrite that tape and write it the way that you want it to sound. We know that it's not there today, but here's where I want to end up being. I am enough. I am powerful. I am strong. I am smart. Whatever those words are for you. And you need to hit those things with frequency. I was in advertising for 20 years. And one of the keys to running a strong ad campaign is to make sure your end user is meeting it with frequency. So you need to do that same thing on that one platform you curate and control, which is your mind. And running that tape again and again, at least 7 times a day, and just committing to it, even if it's just for a month, you will be able to see the positive impact that will have on your confidence and on you.
Oh, I love this. And the way you frame that, it is so great. The negative self-talk, firing the villains. I love that, looking at that negative self-talk as actual, people that you need to fire. You don't need to be listening to them in your brain anymore. Like, get rid of them. I love that.
Well, I took that from the day that woman thought she fired me. I drove home crying and panicked. But what I realized is I actually fired a villain from my life that day. And it became very apparent within 1 week. All of a sudden, amazing people were showing up for me. And I realized that those amazing people were blocked from my life before, when I had a negative villain hovering over me every day. But the minute I fired that villain, my unbelievable things just started happening.
And that's a really good way of looking at it too, because sometimes that's the empowerment piece too, like taking back the power of knowing that it was also your decision, how you were going to move forward in your life. And I can say too, with my experience in Hollywood, that, working with people that, they essentially made me miserable enough that I chose to leave, but that was their, I think that was their intention, was they wanted to squeeze me out. But that was where I did become empowered, when I just said, that's enough. I'm not going to take it anymore. And I'm going to go do what makes me happy and healthy, and, reclaim those pieces of myself that were really being lost in that situation. So I'd love to hear more, because you're so good at sales. And a lot of the people here listening that's a big piece of their business, is securing clients or customers. What are some of the best things that you learned over the years in terms of wisdom that you could impart on our listeners about sales or the sales process?
Sure. So in sales, so much is about the follow-up first and foremost, and that really goes to work ethic and commitment. I have seen countless people fail in sales just because for some reason they think if they go out and do a good presentation or pitch and that their product meets and exceeds the needs that their client has, it should be a slam dunk and no problem. That has never worked in my life. I mean, I can give countless examples of working on a pitch, a client, and a target for years. And it's about that commitment to not giving up and knowing when something is a fit and knowing you just haven't been able to break through. A lot of people will just say, oh, you just can't get to that guy. He's impossible to get to. And I would love those stories because I would say, great, watch, I'll get to him. And it's about being creative. So, you have to have that determination, allow nothing to deter you, create those big targets, and pursue them at all costs. And an example would be, I was pursuing the government for a concept that I wanted to sell them. And everyone kept saying, you can't get to this guy. He's impossible. He's in the government. So I researched him and found that he had an Irish crest, and I happen to be Irish. And I had no idea what my crest was, but I Googled it and figured it out. And I put my crest next to his crest in an email. And I think I put on the subject line, your crest and my crest are almost exactly alike. We need to discuss. And then I went on and on about his crest and about his heritage. I didn't talk about me or my product. And he immediately set up a meeting with me. Another example would be getting Gary Vee on my podcast as my first guest. I had been trying for years to get in contact with him, sending DMs, trying to get to people that knew him. And I Googled him and saw he just launched a wine company with a partner. And I figured, I bet the partner's easier to get to than Gary. So I contacted the partner and I said, hey, I've got a tremendous amount of sales expertise and wine business experience. If you want to jump on a call and I can walk you through some of the techniques I use to become successful and help you succeed with your launch, I'd love to do that for you. So offering value to others and bringing value to the table and not asking for what you want is always a great way to ultimately get what you want. Because once I'm on the phone with him, once I deliver value to him, he's going to say to me, and he did, now how can I help you, Heather? Great. Well, I appreciate you saying that. I'm actually trying to get to Gary Vee. If there's any chance you could set up a meeting for me, that would be great. Sure, no problem. So, it's about looking at things not the same way everybody else is, but how can you see that opportunity that somebody else hasn't spotted yet? And sometimes it just takes time. Sometimes it takes throwing a dart at a wall and trying different things. Conventional typically will not work, typically won't get attention. You need to find what's unique and different about you and lead with that. And when you tap into that, that's when your creative side can really come alive.
Yeah, and this is so important, these things you're pointing out. And we talk a lot about this in my community because a lot of my business owners are contacting the press. And my biggest message to them is always, this is about relationship building. You have to look at that press person on the other end of the phone or the email, whatever it is, as a human being and connect to them first before you just start pitching them and throwing things at them. So finding some common ground. And that Gary Vee example is so great. I love that you were kind of creative in going around and figuring out, like, how can I best reach him and connect to him in a way where you're also bringing value to the table. And I did a little bit of a similar thing with Marianne Williamson, who I had on the podcast, and she was like one of my dream guests. And there was no reason, she's running for president. I'm like, there's no reason right now that she should be taking the time to do a podcast. I hadn't even launched at the time. So I had a podcast with no information out there, but I did a similar thing where I got her in touch through a friend to her right-hand person and asked, if I could help them get some PR, because that's by trade, I'm a publicist. And could I help get them some press for their campaign? And in doing that, that was, the offer was there to if you do that, we'd be happy to, give you some time with her on the phone. And so sometimes it does just take thinking out of the box and being a little creative with, how you approach people. So I think those are such great examples. And with Gary Vee, what was the biggest takeaway when you actually got to interview him?
He's very, very intense, that's for sure.
Yes.
But, it was interesting on my show, he was talking about his life and some of the challenges in his life and some of the negative people in his life and his childhood. When he was young, his grandmother was really negative, and he decided to cut her out of his life at a very young age. And he talked about the importance of surround yourself with like-minded people that could stretch you instead of, hold you back. And then he also shared something that I thought was really impactful. He talked about looking to your children instead of ourselves when we're trying to project the future of business. So if we're trying to look at, what does the next trajectory look like? What is the next industry that's going to explode? Don't see it through our eyes, but watch our children and then see it through their eyes, because they're a better determining factor of what the future holds, because we're coming at everything from our past.
That's beautiful. And yeah, they truly are the future. And it is, I feel like the kids coming into the planet at this point, they just seem so evolved. They really, we've got 19-year-olds solving major world problems. I think one of them's cleaning up the garbage patch out there. So that's a cool perspective. So what about, I know you talked about being on the Steve Harvey show, and you mentioned persistence and follow-up. So many people that are listening, they want to be on, major TV shows like Steve Harvey or maybe the Today Show. You said, I think it was a year in the making, I heard. And that's, something I'm always trying to remind people is that this is not a one-time process. You often have to go back again and again and build that relationship and be persistent and be consistent and reaching out. So I love that you were sharing that this doesn't just happen with the snap of a finger or the snap of your fingers. This is like a process, and sometimes it takes a while. So can you speak a little bit to how that worked for you with landing that after a year?
Sure. Back then, I was working with a PR company, and at that time, I had decided I was traveling so much for promoting that it didn't make sense anymore for me to continue to have a PR firm working for me, because it wasn't the best investment at that point. It was definitely the best investment for my brand originally. There's no doubt. For 3 years, I had a PR firm and getting that credibility and notoriety. However, I got into a place now where I had enough of that. And then now I really needed to be different places, spending money on my trips to meet with people. And so I was reevaluating where my investments were going, and I parted ways with the PR company. They had introduced me to the EVP of the Steve Harvey Show on an email before we parted ways, but they weren't interested in bringing any new guests on. They had the pitch on me. The guy was very nice in the email, but it really just dropped there. And so a couple of months passed, I sent him another email and I said, hey, just wanted to reach back out. I'm going to be in LA. I'm on the Hallmark Channel. I'm on KTLA TV. I was telling him what I was doing in LA that might be of interest to show him that there's value here. Other people, in your space see value. And so he said, okay, well, if you're going to be here, why don't you stop by and we'll just meet? Great. Because getting the face-to-face meeting is everything. And so on that trip, he ended up canceling on me while I was there in town. So I followed up again when I was heading back out a month later and said, I know that you had to cancel. I'm going to be back in town yet again. Is there a possibility for me just to stop by and say hello and introduce myself? Sure, Heather. So that time he was there, and I went in. I had copies of my book signed for him, for Steve, for his team. I had researched him. We had a great dialogue. And he explained to me, you're really different than most guests. We don't typically bring on business type guests. And it's very different. And I use that as an opportunity to show how on different shows I've been on, how they were able to incorporate the business side. So I talked about, when I was on KTLA TV, I was on to talk about how women can get raises, or, a topic of the Me Too movement and how it really has affected corporate America, really more pop culture type timely events, not so much just about being an entrepreneur or being a business person. And he liked that. And he said, okay, I'm going to keep this in mind. And, when the opportunity arises, love to have you back, stay in touch. And that was it. And so I also became friendly with his assistant, because I truly believe if you ever want to, stay in touch with someone, you have to know their assistant. And I had sent her a book, and she sent me a private note and said, I'll let you know what we hear. Nothing. I had reached out to her a couple times. She said, I'm not hearing anything. So I just basically figured, I probably need to come up with a solution. So I started shooting her some different ideas on what I thought might work, and nothing. And I decided to send a life-size cutout of myself to him with a note that said, it's a lot more fun when I'm actually there in person. Let me know what day we're going to film on. And so then I got a note back from his assistant and said, okay, we'd love to have you on a show.
Brilliant.
And, it's going to be in January, this and that. But it didn't stop there, and then I started dealing with the people that were actually shooting the show. And we had 4 different conference calls where they were evaluating if they thought I was the right fit, and essentially giving me a test, on a live call with their team as to how I would handle different situations. And, it was a very long process to ultimately get me there and get on the show, it's kind of wild.
Well, congratulations, because, that's why a lot of people do have PR firms to help them navigate that gauntlet. And the fact that you had the wherewithal and the intuitive guidance for yourself to get you through all of that is amazing. So you definitely have PR in your blood. You might have missed your calling. That is really like the persistence, being creative, with going in and actually like taking the time to get into that office and get that FaceTime. We talk a lot about doing desk side chats or meet and greets or trying to, meet with the press people for coffee, whatever it is, and just get to know them. And then, yes, there are so many things over time that can happen. Even once they say, yes, we want to do it, or we're pretty sure we want to do it. As you saw, you had to go through so many steps and stages where it could have fallen through it so many times. And that's just so awesome that you were able to navigate that and come through. And I love the cutout. I'd never heard of that one, setting the giant cutout. That is brilliant. You got their attention, and that's sometimes what it takes.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Well, congratulations. I know that was a lot of work, and that's such a prestigious show to have appeared on. So do you feel like that has helped in some ways with where you're going with your business now?
It's really challenging to know what are the things that push you over, or what are those tipping points. I can't say that probably being in USA Today was probably the biggest press that I've ever gotten. That was massive, because when you see the conversion come back through on all of your socials and the DMs and, and your website traffic, to me, that's really the best indicator, or book sales, or podcast downloads. Seeing those conversions is really the only way that I'm able to measure it. Now, those 3 years leading up till then, when I had launched my personal brand, it started out with small press in order to get to the larger press. So all of those little things were what helped you get enough credibility to get to the medium thing, which is what allowed you to get to that large opportunity. So it's hard to ever say that it's just one thing. It's really a culmination of everything that really allows you to present yourself as an expert, or whatever it is that you're trying to appear outward facing to allow you to sell your books, or whatever your goal may be.
Yeah. And, we often talk about how it's a bit of a ladder or a staircase. And that's a good point you brought up. A lot of times we start in the backyard, our own backyard of our niche or our hometown or where we live, and build up from local or regional, working our way up to the bigger national to international press. So that's so cool that within just a short, time, it just sounds like a couple years, you were able to make that happen for yourself. I've worked, with tons of people over the years, and sometimes it takes a few months, sometimes it takes a year or two, sometimes it takes 3 to 5 years. It just depends on, each person's journey with it and how they're aligned and poised and if they're ready for that. So obviously you had it all lined up. The world was ready for what you had to offer. The press responded to it. And that's awesome. You were also able to tie into, it sounds like, themes that were happening in the marketplace, in the world, in the news, that makes it relevant. Because at the end of the day, whatever you're bringing to the show, it has to be relevant to their viewers. So congratulations again.
Thank you.
So awesome. And you talk a lot about diving into a vulnerable place. I think I heard you talk about that in your podcast. And can you tell us a little bit about what you mean by that?
Sure. As a leader in business for a long time, I was very closed off. I didn't want people to know about my weaknesses. I didn't want them to be aware of my personal life, my background, where I came from. And it took years. It was actually, I first started understanding and even tapping into this 5 years ago. So I was still in corporate America. And it happened at a charity event. I was hosting a charity luncheon, and I decided that in that luncheon, we were creating revenue for underprivileged children in the Miami area. And I decided to share my personal story of what it was like growing up using food stamps and how that really feels. And it's the first time I'd ever publicly spoken about having grown up poor. No one knew that. And people, these people only knew me through business over the past, decade or so. And so I think people create stories of what they believe for others. So I think there was stories created that I apparently grew up with a silver spoon in my mouth. So when I shared that story, it was overwhelming, the response that I got on social media that day at the event and all the private messages that I received after. And it taught me something, that being the most real version, the most honest, and the most vulnerable version of you, and vulnerable because it was really hard for me to tell that story. I had felt embarrassed about it. I had felt disconnected from it. So to share that was really emotional for me. It was very scary. And it ended up being this extremely powerful moment in my life where I realized the more real I show up, even if I'm scared, even if I don't feel like it's going to be easy and it might not be received well, the better I'm going to feel about myself and the more I'm going to connect to the people that I'm supposed to be connecting with.
Mm. Yeah, I feel like that's been a common theme coming up too, is just that vulnerability and authenticity. And even for myself, like having guests that do a lot more solo episodes or a lot more just talking about what's going on in their life, where I typically do more interview format style. But the episode airing, I think before this one, is a solo episode where I actually talk about publicly about my dad and his alcoholism and losing my father. And that was a big step for me to put myself out there in that way. But the more I talk to people like my recent guest, Rob Dial, who pretty much his whole podcast is just him talking. Every once in a while he has a guest. And listening to people like you who are very open and honest and sharing like their deepest things that are happening in their personal lives on their show, it's inspired me to say, you know what, I want to do more of that and put myself out there in a way, because it helps when you do that. You're expanding yourself as a person, you're growing, and then you're also able to help and serve other people who might be going through similar things, and they just know they're not alone at that point, and you can grow on the journey together. So I think that's so awesome that you do that, and I thank you for the inspiration, because I've listened to your show and I think it's wonderful. I'd like to hear more about your book as well. You have, it's The Confidence Creator. Can you tell us a little bit more about it? I heard also that you were hoping to, turn it into a movie?
Yes. Yeah. I really, so the book is a compilation of my lowest moments and how I learned to leverage those moments to create confidence. So it really takes you through a vast period of my life and some of the horrible things that happened and how I basically pivoted those moments to learn from them and then take different steps forward in order to ultimately, get to where I am today. So it was really scary writing the book. It was really scary publishing the book and putting it out there. However, once I did, I was on Maria Menounos' podcast in Los Angeles, and she does her show out of her house. And she had read my book before I had come on, and I showed up to her house, and I was really nervous. And we did the show. It went great. And after the show, she said, "Heather, listen, I love your book. I mean, I don't know what I can do to help you, but I've got to do something. We need to, get this book out there. It's amazing." And I said, "Well, I keep being told by people that I need to turn this book into a movie. And I've looked at, who's creating movies, and Reese Witherspoon seems to be the right fit. She creates movies off of female authored books. I just feel like I'm drawn to knowing. I need to meet her." And she said, "Well, sadly, I don't know her." She said, "But give me your cell. I'll give you my cell. If anything ever changes or I think of anything, I'll get a hold of you." The next day, I was on set in LA doing a promotion for my book. And I get a message from Maria. And she said, "Sit down. Guess who just called me?" Reese Witherspoon. And she said, "Guess what? She wants me to come on her podcast next week. Someone canceled. And I'm going Friday at noon. Overnight me some books as soon as you get home. Make sure they get to me by such and such date. And I'm going to hand walk them into her." So I did that and waited. And she called me that day and said, "It went great. I told them about your book. I handed it to everybody there on set. They know about the book. They know about you. Let's just keep our fingers crossed," because she said I didn't exchange numbers with her. So I don't know that I'll ever talk to her again, but we'll see where it goes from here. So sadly, I've not heard from her, but I don't let that deter me. Every time I'm at any speaking engagement, or I mentioned it on my podcast. So what's happened since then, because I do mention it quite frequently, is I was doing an event for a large media company in New York, and the owner is a billionaire. And I put it out there during my speech. And at the end, he said, please come to my office. And I went to his office and he said, I've got to share something with you. I've worked with Reese Witherspoon before. Let me, put it in my notes. And the next time I come in contact with her team, I'm going to bring you up. I said, great. So then I did my podcast the other day with this woman, Jen Friel, and she was listening to our episode and she called me right away after and she said, I just heard that you're looking to meet Reese Witherspoon. I'm friends with her husband and I'm going to see him next month. Wow. It's like all of this stuff is sales and essentially trying to get to that ultimate decision maker. And there's so many different points of contact, but sometimes it's just about continuing to put what your goal is out to the universe, continuing to keep it front and center and connect those dots, because maybe she got the book that day from Maria and she was off to pick up her kids from school and it got thrown in the trunk of her car and she forgot about it. But the next time she runs into someone that does know me, that mentions me, she'll say, oh, I got to check out that book. And then maybe she hears about it again from her husband. It's about frequency and staying relevant and staying top of mind. And, as long as you just don't give up on it, then the chances are pretty high that it'll end up happening.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. And it is. It's like coming in at all different angles, not giving up. I mean, that's what it really takes for, I think, anything in life is, if you're trying to connect with someone or make something happen, you just got to try coming in every which way possible. And you're obviously doing that. And it looks like you're getting there. I'm excited to hear what happens next. So do keep us posted on that. And I heard that you're also going to be speaking. You have a TEDx talk coming up. You spoke recently or lectured at Harvard. Can you tell us a little bit about your speaking engagements? Can anyone see you coming up soon? And, how has speaking kind of played a part in the role of your business here?
Yeah, speaking is my number one revenue driver for my company, but it's important for people to know for 20 years when I was back in corporate America, I spoke every single day. It was just part of my job. I didn't get paid separately for it. So I had a tremendous amount of experience doing it before I started doing it for myself and getting paid for it. And I think that that's been confusing for some people, is no one saw that period of my life when I was in corporate America. I, of course, did. And I was very frustrated when I found out I could have been getting paid a lot more than I was had I known about this business, which tells me now we always need to pick up our head beyond our industry and look at other industries and look at what other value we can add to other industries or how we could potentially work with other industries. Because had I known this 10 years ago, I probably would have left corporate America a long time ago. So again, that was kind of my background and how I got into speaking. And really, I leaned into the speaking because I figured out the way to sell books is to speak to crowds and sell your book at the event. So that's really how I got into that. As far as, the TED Talk that I have coming up, that was a year in motion. I put a Google alert on TED Talks and I would apply to every single TED Talk that would come up. And I would send the same pitch about how I'm such a great speaker and I've been speaking for 20 years, and I would send footage. And what I didn't realize, and I only found out a couple of months ago, is that's not the way to get a TED Talk. In fact, most TED Talks don't want professional speakers. So I was actually deterring these people from, instead of drawing them closer to me, I was pushing them away. And I found out because I had a woman that showed up to an event I was doing about my book. I was speaking about my book, and she stayed after to have me sign her book. And she mentioned, I'm on the team for a TED Talk out here in Florida, and I can't believe you haven't had one yet. And I shared with her, I have a Google alert. I send out a pitch every day. And she said, what's the pitch say? And I told her, and she started laughing. So what she taught me to do was refine the pitch. And once I understood what they're looking for, I had to take keynote speaker off the bio. I had to not send my speaker reel. It wasn't about that. It was about the big idea. And it was about refining that big idea so that they would feel excited. And it was about matching their theme that they had for their TED environment and event with my big idea. And so it was so different than, the approach was completely different than what I had been doing. I now understood why I hadn't been getting a TED Talk. And it only took a couple of months after that to be able to land it. So now I'm in the process of working with the team at TEDx Boca Raton on the outline, and the actual talk will be October 26th, and there are tickets available for that. I think that we have 2,000 people that can attend. So We still have a lot of tickets left. I'm also speaking September 3rd in Boston at an event. It's called Hypergrowth. It's a sales and marketing event. And I'm actually interviewing Sarah Blakely and her husband, Jesse Itzler, which I'm super excited about. And then the following week, I'm speaking at a media conference, and there's tickets available for this too in Philadelphia. And I'm speaking the last week of September at Bacardi Women in Leadership in Miami, and there are tickets available for that as well.
Oh, fantastic. And we can, if you want to give us any of those links, we can add them to the show notes as well, so people can check those out. And great insight into the TEDx talk and how to pitch. I know there are definitely people in this community that are either planning to do that or starting to pitch for TEDx talks. So that is going to be very helpful for them in that process. And I just would love to hear from you. Like, what is it in this new path that you're on, and, with all that you're doing with your podcast and your book and your speaking, what is it that lights you up the most about it all?
Probably the fact that, for my son, I'm being an example of living a purpose-driven life. He saw me in corporate America for his first 10 years of his life, being frustrated and not living to my potential and getting, late night phone calls from the nasty woman. And, he really saw me struggle with all of that. And then he saw me really struggle with getting fired. But he also saw me pick myself right back up and reinvent myself and lean into my passion and take chances and reinvent myself as an author. And, he saw all those different steps along the way. And he's been, such a big part of this process and encouraging me that it inspires me every day that he will be able to truly be whatever he wants in his life, because he's been able to see when I've made the wrong moves and wrong decisions and held myself back, and when I've made the right moves by taking those leaps of faith and putting myself out there and pushing until I'm able to make it happen. So to me, that's definitely my biggest inspiration.
Oh, that's beautiful. And if you could go back in time and give advice to a younger version of yourself, how old would you be, and what advice would you give?
Every year of my life, I would have said to myself, you are enough. You are so much more than you see right now. Things are going to work out. Take chances on you and believe in you. Your ideas are amazing. So much of my life, I would have amazing ideas and, just stuff them down and think, oh, that's not going to happen for me. I've got to follow this line that I'm on. I'm moving up the corporate ladder. I got to stay on this path. And I would have left there a decade ago, at least. Once I had that sales and leadership expertise after 10 years, I would have been gone and had started my own company then. I would have taken chances on me, taken chances on my ideas, and believed in my vision and pursued it wholeheartedly.
Oh, love that. Amazing. I know you also mentioned that you have something you wanted to give to our listeners today. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So I actually created a free ebook, and we'll put the link in the show notes so that everybody can have it. And ultimately, it's a very small version of my book, which is going to lay out a few different steps that you can take over a 30-day period to create confidence in yourself and put yourself first so you can start living your best life.
Beautiful. And the link to the show notes or the website is in the description of the show here, whatever platform you're listening on, but also just in case, it's podcast.theshinestrategy.com to get those notes and links. And where else can people find you? Or do you have, your website or social platforms that you hang out on more than others?
Sure. So I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. I'm on everything at Heather Monahan. And then my website is heathermonahan.com.
Beautiful. And do you have any last thoughts or words of wisdom for our listeners today?
Oh my gosh, just go for it. Put yourself first. Create your confidence, because in every moment you're either creating confidence or chipping away at it. The choice is yours.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here today, Heather. And thank you all for listening. And I hope you'll keep us posted and come back and visit us again soon.
I'd love to. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us today for the Shine Strategy Podcast. I invite you to join me at shineinsiders.com for a free masterclass where you can get more inspiration and strategies to get visible and change the world. Your voice matters. Please subscribe, rate, and share this show so we can continue to grow on this journey together. Until the next one, it's Heather Burgett, your Shine Strategist, signing off.